Order. Councilman Barriger and Councilman Hillingsbeck is present. Planning Commission members are not here. And with that, Mr. Hillingsbeck will. Right. Sure.
Our Heavenly Father, Lord, we ask your blessings on this meeting tonight. Lord, we ask for wisdom and guidance in the decisions we made, so they'll be for the betterment of the people of this parish. Father, as always, we lift up the military, asking you to watch over those members that serving abroad in harm's way, comfort their families in their absence. These things we pray in your Son's name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, public comment period. We will have people address us at any point in the meeting that you would like. Okay, the first thing we have is a report and update on changes in Ascension Parish construction specifications. Mr. Michael Songy. For the benefit of those that don't know, we had been meeting, Mr. Songy had been meeting with different people in the industry and DPW and the Planning Commission, in a planning department, to try to go through and streamline and improve the subdivision construction specifications, and that's been an ongoing process, and we just wanted to get an update.
Thank you. We had a meeting last Wednesday, I believe, with several contractors and provided some pretty detailed comments on the majority of the sections. Pretty well, I think Bill sat in on the meeting as well, but we none of the comments received were anything that we couldn't live with, and so we're in the process of making those revisions, and there's still one more section on sewer that we're awaiting some comments on. But I would think that, I don't know what schedule you're on, but I would think we could certainly have the document revised and circulated and be ready for the next, your meeting next month.
Okay.
To come back. And then at that point go to council.
That would be great. And then it's going to go to Planning Commission for ratification.
Well, I think what we talked about was the actual ordinance could still go forward. In the future, the Planning Commission is going to have the ability to amend the specifications at without coming back to the council. What we're asking from the council is to change the ordinance to go from DOTD standard specifications to these new ones. And so I think obviously the contractors and interested parties want to make sure that it's in an acceptable form prior to the ordinance being passed. But I really don't know why you couldn't do them simultaneously.
Okay.
Go back to the commission's already approved them, but we would have to take these changes back to them as well.
Okay. And I just want to add that I sat in on the meeting, and I was very informative and very pleased about the technical aspect of what was put in. I thought there was some good dialogue, and it showed people working together. That was a good thing. So I appreciate you and Mr. Rue for taking care of that.
Sure.
Thank you. Update on parish grants. Mr. Paul Keller is not here. Can you contact him next time, Ms. Suzanne, again? And discussion on traffic impact fees. We wanted to put this up here to just check and see where everyone was at, and if there was any other concerns. Again, for the benefit of those, we've had meetings last week with Mr. Charles Landry. I think most of the council members in groups of 2, 3, and 4, and had a chance to ask questions. And he is in the process right now of taking that information and drawing up the next, I believe it's the 12th.
Yeah, version 12.
Version, taken from all of the input from everyone. So we're at that point now, And the way it looks is that they will be given that to us, and we can take a look at it and go to the council with that as a recommendation, or a possibility of introducing that as an ordinance then, and then we can amend it if we deem necessary from that standpoint. So I think everybody's had an opportunity for input. If there was anything else that needed to be said or suggested, we wanted to do so at this time. Okay. Update on adjudicated properties, Mr. Richard Throckmorton.
We've been in the process of looking for an attorney to be able to do adjudicate properties. We have met with 5 or 6, and at this time we finally someone that will probably be able to get our adjudicate properties off and running. In fact, he works for Larry Book, who does adjudicate properties for East Baton Rouge Parish. He has an assistant there, and he's willing to come down here and be able to set up programs very similar, if not the same program that East Baton Rouge Parish has. So it looks like we're very close to having that attorney contract out to be able to do that for us.
And you do also need an appraiser?
Yeah, the appraiser. Yeah, we still haven't got the appraiser, but I think that will be fairly easy to come by. Okay. There's lots of details we still need to work out. Oh no, we have Bill here, and we still got some things we still need to work out when we get this attorney with about how those things will all take place, and the fees that we will charge people for those things, and hopefully we'll have all that done, and we can make a report.
Do you have a timeline on that?
Well, hopefully by the middle of June we will have him on board. Now, for us, I've talked with him today, and he's kind of an aggressive type person. He wants to be able to put on a couple of seminars and let the public know how the adjudicated properties work, and might put them on 2121. He's willing to do that for us. So that's some things we still have to work out. But I think with the people we have now, we'll be able to do that.
Okay. Very good.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
When you said coming down here, I assume it's a Baton Rouge attorney?
Yes.
Richard? And
His name Troy Humphrey.
Troy Humphrey, and there wasn't any local interest our local attorney showed any interest?
We had 5, and one was a local attorney. He's been here for 4 years.
Yeah.
He's been in the parish for 4 years.
Okay.
So.
Did he have any prior experience in this field?
Not with adjudicate properties.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that these attorneys that we did interview, most of them had some experience with title searches and those type of things and closing, but none of them really adjudicate properties.
Right. I know it's important. Yeah.
Okay. So we did interview and we did talk with them. All right.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, and I think you're an ongoing process of taking down some houses,
Yeah, I still do the
abandoned
abandoned. I have I probably have about 25 to 30 houses that I've been working on, and so far in the parish I've been able to take 10 down without going to a curator or going through redoing it ourselves. Right now I have 2 presently that will be we voted on last year council meeting to be taken down in Dara. They should be coming down this week. And also, we have probably one coming up, probably announced council meeting. I have about 10 or 12 been taken down by individuals. Hopefully I can make a PowerPoint presentation and show you those houses and those things that we have done so far. Okay?
That'd be fantastic.
If y'all would be interested in seeing that.
Well,
Okay?
yeah, we just believe, the people in the parish are really excited about having the opportunity to get some of these abandoned houses that are.
And we have a tremendous amount of those houses here, and when we start going to get into them because of property rights, and a lot of these people, these homes, they never had successions on these homes, and it just takes we're working at it, and we're doing forward with it.
We know it's a long process. We appreciate it. Thank you for all you do.
Yeah. And just like I said, I sent you one today, Richard. I don't know, it's late this afternoon. I don't know if you've seen it.
Well, I got 2 or 3 in your area right now I'm working on.
Okay. Well,
One on Brown Road.
Yeah.
And I think I took one care for one on Mortgage Street for you.
Yeah.
I think that was taken down. I don't know if you've seen it or
Y'all,
not.
y'all also did one back there off of, I think off of Pearl and Marianne.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. So.
Yeah.
It takes a while,
what you've
but
done.
like I said, that was a house that never had succession. It had four children involved. It just takes a little time, but we're working at it.
Yeah, thank you.
While we had you up there, I also wanted to announce a sad bit of news, because you had an opportunity while we were working on some of the old houses. One of the men that was always involved in community projects and everything, Mr. Paul Madison, he passed away this past week, and we just wanted to let his family know and everything, all the people around there, how sorry we are for his passing. And,
Yeah, he's been. When I went to Lemonville over there, he was very helpful in helping me find some individuals and people that would be able to take down some of those homes in that area.
Yeah.
So and they kind of looked up to Paul to be able to give them direction. So
he was a very good man, and
Yeah.
we'll all miss him a lot.
You bet.
Thank you. All right, next thing is TV guidelines.
Mr. Chairman, you missed the junk card.
Oh, I'm sorry, junk card.
Well, they got me up with that too. I talked to O'Neill Perriton today about that. He said that I think he came here before, and they said y'all want to tailor yours after the way that Gonzales has theirs, and he asked for some input or changes that y'all might want to do to that. He says he's never received any input or far as changes for those things. So I'm just saying, I'm just a messenger here. So
Yeah, and we appreciate that, and what we're looking for. I mean, we were given documents, probably 50 pages of documents detailing different aspects of the junk car ordinance, and I don't think anybody really could make heads and tails of the legal jargon.
Okay.
And if we could get something that's very plain and to the point about what exactly is involved in each one of those aspects. It was about 5 different ordinances you had to pass in order to do something.
Right. I have 12 right here.
Okay.
As I went through, it's 12 of them. So it's 12 things. 12 ways you're able to put these together to be able to make it happen.
Yeah,
So,
and for us to do that and not getting the full impact of exactly what we're doing there, it makes it very hard to go and vote on something like that. So if we could get something that would be, in layman's term, what exactly does this mean, and go down the line, we could make a decision.
I'll take that back to O'Neill and tell them what y'all's concerns are with that.
And we'd like to have it, like that, but for the next meeting.
I'll report back to O'Neill and see if we can have that for you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Now we're on number 10. TV guidelines. We have a lady in the audience to speak.
Yes, my name is Catherine Guppel. You know that. I'm saying that for the people that will watch on TV. I'm very concerned about this issue. In the absence of a Citizens Advisory Board for the channel, we have now a situation where we don't have a public access channel anymore. We have a propaganda machine. And the public is not being served. They're being deceived by a lot of the things that are being put on there. This channel wasn't really meant to be a platform for our elected officials to promote themselves. And that's what's happening. To select what people will see and hear. That's really not what the TV was for. It was for the people to have access not just to their government, but to their community. We have been about a year now without any management of the station. We are spending twice as much as we were spending before we canceled the contract with Mr. David Young, and we have a lot less content in the programming. In the absence of these procedures or guidelines, and actually we don't have any procedures because the committee that was to be set up, the advisory committee, would have established guidelines for the TV and procedures for what would go on the TV. Other municipalities and parishes in this state and all around the nation have established guidelines. If you don't have established guidelines, you take a chance that you'll do something illegal. Okay? You were given a set of guidelines almost 8 weeks ago, and they have gone through legal. And legal has confirmed that everything in there is legal. You can do it. You can set those guidelines and rules for the channel. I just want to share with you just briefly what has been my experience with this particular lack of a process in the last 8 weeks. I submitted to the administration a DVD on Keys to Good Government, since the administration said they only wanted government-related items on this channel. And it's basically a documentary, very well done, with quotes from the founding fathers on what their idea of government was when they started this country. It's an excellent history lesson. I've checked every week. My DVD has been to the home of parish employees. It has even gone to Mississippi, to the parish president's farm. Presently, it is being reviewed. I've been told it's being reviewed by Donald Sanji, the superintendent of schools. So you can see there's a very confusing and a lack of direction in how programming is going to be handled on this channel. After 8 weeks, no one can tell me yes or no. They can't tell me how many more people must review this program before it could be aired, if it can be aired. And they cannot tell me how much longer this process is going to take. Now I'm being told that the powers that be have not been able to make a decision. This demonstrates that procedures and guidelines truly need to be in place. I personally don't have a TV. I can watch the programming on my computer at home. But the people that do have TV and have cable pay the franchise fees. I know there's an argument being made that, oh, we can't do programming because that's going to cost us money. Okay. Right now we're spending 40%, only 40% of our franchise fees, which is twice what we were spending before on the TV, about $250,000. There's 60% that's going into the general fund. If we took 10% of this money, which is around, let's see here, $55,000, that would be an average of $4,000 a month. We could take that money and we could pay someone to go and produce a program for the Jambalaya Festival that's coming up. Is that program? Is that going to be a program of people that can't go to the festival? Are they going to be able to see that on the TV? That used to be on the TV. High school graduations, recreation that's going on in the parish. The historic Donaldsonville program a couple of weeks ago, that's not been on the TV. That was an historic event in our parish, and it's not available for people to see. I think that's a shame.
That's about time, Ms. Campbell.
Okay. Let me just put it in perspective. We are paying around $25,000 a month for Lamar Dixon lease. And $4,000 is not that much for the viewers.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I really would like us to pass some guidelines and have a process that we can move smoothly forward and get more programming.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
We have, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to some of Ms. Goppelt's comments. One, I disagree that it is a propaganda channel promoting government and elected officials. I think, I know probably for the first, you can sit down, Ms. Goppelt. I'm not going to have a dialogue with you. I'm just going to respond to your statement.
Mr. Chairman, we don't need to direct any comments to the public.
I'm not going to be asking you any questions.
Yeah.
I'm just responding.
Just a second, point of order. Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Now, to my knowledge, we spent approximately $65,000 buying equipment in order to get all of our governmental meetings, our committee meetings, council meetings, finance meetings, all the various committees, planning and zoning, board of adjustments. In fact, it's if you tune in now, just about any time of the day or the night, you don't have to wait long. You'll see your government in action. And I checked on this recently. Again, how much money have we spent securing equipment? And some of this money was budgeted in the courthouse renovations, and we'd spent $65,000. Now, we were paying Mr. Young $110,000 a year, and I realize Mr. Young is a friend of yours, Ms. Coppell. But a lot of times when you tune in, you could not hear what was being said. I mean, if you could see it, but a lot of times you could not hear what was being said, the spoken word, because the audio was so bad. Now, we budgeted 40% of the franchise fees, but we have not spent 40% of the franchise fees. There is a difference of budgeting and spending, okay? Go back to Mr. Young's contract. The night his contract was approved, I brought a competing contract from Baton Rouge, handed it out myself for $30,000 a year. So we were going to save the taxpayers of Ascension Parish $80,000 a year over the course of a 5-year contract, $400,000. And of course, my substitute motion to send both proposals back to Finance Committee for consideration and review failed. I also tried to recognize Mr. Art Root, whose proposal came forth for $30,000 a year, and I was gavelled down that night. I was told as a councilman at the first meeting in Donaldsonville, March meeting of 2004, I couldn't recognize someone from the audience so they could speak on their proposal. And I learned after the meeting was over, I learned that this gentleman had filled out a public access comment card to speak on the agenda item, but he found that in the trash can when the meeting was over. And so this is just good old boy politics, taking care of our partners and not watching out for the taxpayers' dollars. So I'm just going to go on record. I resent what you said. On occasion, you don't have your facts right, and that's, again, the case tonight. And just want to go on record.
Excuse me.
So, no, he's not.
No, excuse me, Mr. Hillenbeck.
Yeah.
I think what she stated, she can state. She has a right to state.
She has to state. She has every right to come down. I've said this before as well. Anyone can come down here and can say anything they want to say, and guess what? Doesn't have to be the truth. And but I just as always, I think I usually have my facts right, and I think I got them right again tonight. So that being said,
we do not need to call out names. This is not a personal thing, and you can state anything you want to state here. Do not call out names and do not get personal. Thank you. Okay. Ms. Barringer, you have any comments? One thing I'd like to say is that we've brought this with the council, and we had a meeting of a committee before, and it was suggested that we have a citizens committee in order to bring a process about this. It was voted in and then vetoed and then upheld in a legal process. Even though I disagree with that decision, that's the way, that's the way it is. My question that we have now is that since that time, we've gone back and Councilman Fontenot has given and going through legal, and she's given some suggestions that of what has been done in other places. And this is a PEG channel. It is government access, and everybody here in the parish, with the council and administration, has said that we would most certainly give government programs the highest priority, and they would all be shown if at all possible, and whenever possible. But there's also the possibility, and I think one of the things that would be good for this parish is to have educational access. And to say that this is the parish government paying for this, I think is a misnomer, because the people of the parish are paying franchise fees, and those are the very people that are getting the service. And it goes back to them, whether it's an educational program, whether it's a community program, whether it's a government program. The people of the parish, in my opinion, have a right to government programs. I think it's a must that they should see what goes on in this government. And we're trying to do that very much so, and I agree with that. But we also, I think, have an obligation to put on as many educational programs as possible. And if the school board would like to get on board and help us fund some of those, that would be fantastic, but we do have a funding mechanism to put on as many as we can. And there's also a public access program that we can run through and run some programs that are good for the public. And I do realize that we have some private television stations that are here in town, E-Tel and Cox. Neither one of them addresses all of the people of the parish. Each one of them has their own private agendas, which, you know, I'm glad for them, and they do very good program, and we appreciate both of them. But there are some programs that are for the benefit of the public that are not commercially paying, and that people have a right to be able to see and enjoy. And I think we ought to do whatever we can do to try to put that on. With that being said, my biggest problem is that we have no process. There is not a process to get something on TV, and it has been said over and over that any government program can get on TV. And the question goes back to who decides that, and what's your definition of a government program, and who's going to push that. And so I would just like to see a process. There's been one, has been told to us many times. There is one that is being presented right here, and if somebody else comes up with a better one, bring it forward. But until then, I would like to see us go forward with that. I talked to the parish president yesterday extensively, and both he and I decided or suggested that we should have a committee meeting where we sit down and go over these things as closely as possible with as many of the council members we could have without a quorum, so that we can discuss these things and come to agreement, so that we can have a process in place for the people of the parish, so that there's no uncertainty. You'll know what, or you'll get a decision on what can be shown and how it can be shown, and there's a process, and we don't put anybody on the spot. So I would like to see that, and I would like to set up a meeting sometime next week, probably Thursday, if we could get one in the afternoon before the council meeting. Looks like would be the best time. Is there some time that would be favorable to you guys?
After 5, for sure.
Okay, we're a council meeting at 7. Okay. You want to try to do it at 5? Okay.
Right here?
Well, we're going to have to do it probably in Donaldsonville. We're meeting in Donaldsonville.
You might want to make it 6.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking Donaldsonville. No way I can make it for 5.
Well, let's do it 5:30.
Make it for
6.
You're not going to have much time.
Well, it shouldn't take an hour.
Okay.
Look over. If this is the only thing on the agenda.
Yes, that's it.
All right.
That's it.
You want a strategic planning committee?
Well, no.
Just call
It's
it
just
special
it's
strategic
just a TV committee meeting. Or you want to do a strategic planning?
Call it
committee?
strategic planning. There's 5 members here, and other members, if they want, they can sit in the audience, and it
Okay.
wouldn't be constituted as a quorum.
That's good. We'll have a special meeting next Thursday.
Of the TV committee?
Right. That'll be before the council meeting, and administration is supposed to send a representative so that we can hash this out.
Am I supposed to know who's on the TV committee?
Well, we have the strategic planning committee.
Okay. All right.
But if you don't mind, notify the other council members that this meeting is taking place in case they want to come.
This is going to be at 6 p.m. prior to the regular council.
Right. We're going to have it in that conference room at the office.
It's 6 o'clock.
Yes, sir. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Next thing is update on drainage ordinance. Mr. Songier, and I'm sorry, Mr. Songier, I was supposed to move you up so you could.
No, that's
take
quite
care of
okay.
one.
I had a chance to review some notes, so it was good. The official status of the drainage ordinance is it's been drafted, it's been approved by the Planning Commission, and at this point, I think it's been introduced to the Strategic Planning Committee. It's my understanding that members of the committee have received copies of the ordinance. I know that certain members of you have questioned me about some certain things and issues, so I presume that you have all received it, or if you hadn't, we can certainly get it to you. Do you want me to kind of run through some of the highlights of it, Kent? Would that be appropriate? Okay. Probably the biggest issue in the ordinance is that it will be part of what we're calling the Unified Development Code, which means that the ordinance will apply to all property owners. Under the applicability section 2, this ordinance shall be applicable to the development of property, and it goes on to basically state that any man-made change to a piece of property is considered development, and therefore it will be applicable to everyone. It addresses the grade requirements for roadways, 4 different criteria that it must meet. It addresses the grade criteria for structures. Most importantly, states that structures must be constructed 1 foot above the FEMA 100-year. Also, 1 foot above any existing roadway in front of the proposed structure. This is a big issue in that a lot of people's property is lower than the road, and we all know that here. The roads tend to act as dams when you have floods here, and the water is generally going to get up to the elevation of the road before it relieves itself. So we feel this is an important item. It goes to protect existing watersheds when development plans are proposed. They pretty much need to maintain the existing ridge lines and watersheds that we have so that we're not throwing additional water onto an adjacent property. It states that if you have an existing stream or conveyance, ditch, whatever, through the property, that you must prove when you complete your development or change that you must maintain the water surface profile that exists in its current condition. There's been a lot of talk about fill, and this act in itself does restrict fill. A lot of times people see a ditch, but what they don't realize in a 10-year storm that the flow in that ditch may be 300 or 400 feet wide. And when people go place fill adjacent to those ditches, they are limiting the capacity and the conveyance that ditch can handle. So this section...
Excuse me, I think we see an example of that right now on Bayou Manchac.
We talked about that right when if you coming from Baton Rouge down Airline Highway, as soon as you cross into the parish on the right-hand side, there's a lot of fill being placed, right there, and I'm sure this would address that. But the only way we have of regulating fill right now is in the development of subdivisions, because we're reviewing their plans and commenting at the preliminary plat stage. but commercial developments aren't having to comply with any type of regulation regarding this right now.
Under the new ordinance, so your commercial developments would have to comply with the new ordinance, right?
Yes, they would.
Okay.
Yes, they would. Any change in grade, would have to comply. Now, that doesn't mean that, I'll get into some fill issues in the floodplain in a minute, but we would have the jurisdiction and the ability to prevent something like that from happening if we felt it was damaging or increasing the water surface profiles.
Michael, do you want us to comment as you go, or do you want to wait till?
Whatever. If y'all want to comment as we
I
go.
just had a couple of.
Sure.
You said on man-made improvements, then you would have to adhere to drainage ordinance. What does that mean? If somebody has a lot and they drop some landscaping materials on there, I mean, what is that?
Well, I mean, that's a judgment call. Landscaping is going to be consequential. I mean, pretty much an inconsequential effect.
Okay.
But if they're, and we'll get into this in a minute, but if they're 2 feet below the floodplain and they need to haul in 4 feet of fill, they would be able to do it, but it would be with some certain restrictions.
Okay.
And we'll get into that in a minute. But no, it would apply to everyone. Right now, the only jurisdiction that's happening is on the subdivision developers.
Right.
And pretty much everyone else out there is.
And the other thing I'm concerned about, and you talked about roads, we have some situations in the parish where we have some roads that are at a certain height, and people have built their houses, been there for 20 years, and the houses are maybe 2 or 3, 4 inches above the road. And you're having a situation where the water comes up and it goes over the road. It goes over the road right now. And we're in the situation, and one is on Roddy Road, where we're talking about doing the bridges, and they're going to build up the roads. And right now, there's a couple of houses that the water comes up very quickly, and then as soon as it goes over the roads, it goes about 16 inches over the road, it kind of levels out, and it has some relief on it. We need to make sure that we have some provisions. If we're going to raise the roads above so that they're flooded, is that we're going to have some provisions in there that we can allow enough water. We put enough box culverts or something that will allow as much water to go under or around the bridges with box culverts along the road as they would have before we raised the road, because if not, we're going to be flooding houses by doing some improvements on roads.
You're exactly correct, and what we're trying to do in this ordinance is not just, a lot of people think that flooding or impacts of development is simply the fact that you're putting down concrete and rooftops and you're decreasing decreasing the impervious area. It's not just about that. It's also about the changes that you make to a channel's conveyance or its ability to convey water. And you're right. Just about every parish road here is elevated above natural ground, and it basically acts as a weir or a dam at some point and allows water. That's the relief. That's where that water is getting out. And you're right. When you raise a road, you're probably going to impact, although you may think you're doing the right thing for the road, you're probably going to impact someone's home.
Well, I mean, there's very few roads in the parish that people cannot go on. That
you're right.
It's very much an inconvenience, and it's something that is covered. But I would like to make sure we put a provision that just the opposite, that if we do build up a road, that we do have enough open space that allows for at least as much water before to flow through at high water marks.
This ordinance, and unless y'all want to take it in a different direction, but under purpose and intent, it's the intent is for protection of flooding to properties caused by the development of property in Ascension Parish.
And so a road is a property.
Yeah, but I don't know what you're talking about is basically the parish. You as a council directing Mr. Rue, hey, this road is flooding, so can you go raise it? And he says, sure, we can raise it. And he goes and raises it.
And it floods the houses.
And it floods the houses. This document is not trying to police what the Department of Public Works is doing. In other words, this is intended to regulate the development of private property. I don't quite know where to
Well, and that's why I wanted
Yeah.
to address this here, because we're talking about a drainage
that's
ordinance.
really more of a
And I want to make sure that the people are protected on things that we do, and that inadvertently we don't
Right.
create more of a problem for.
I think that would
for
almost
residents.
be more of an internal policy, if you will.
Mr. Root, can we handle that internally?
And we do, and I agree with Ms. Sonia. This should be separate than what we're talking about in this ordinance. And we look at all these. In fact, the Roddy Road issue, we took that under consideration when designing the bridges to go under there. So that that should be a separate issue than this ordinance.
Okay, because I would like to see, before it's over, that our engineers would say that
But
we're
that-
going to have enough flow that they do
No,
now.
that is our responsibility, not to cause a problem by improving a public works project, anything
And
like this.
it can be modeled and determined that sufficient culverts are in place so that you don't increase that level, but a lot of water can flow across a road, and it takes an awful big culvert sometimes
It's a lot of
to
culverts.
match. That's exactly right. So a lot of times it may not be that feasible. But
Well, we either have to do that or we need to buy up some houses.
I think you just have to have a cognizance when you raise a road, what are we doing? And again, I go back to, it has nothing to do that you've increased, the impervious area or development has nothing to do with that. You have changed a conveyance system by raising that road, and have to be aware of
Mr.
it.
Hillenbeck.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sanji, I've got a few items I need to discuss and get your input and feedback
Okay.
on. One is, I believe it is federal law, and it's real plain. It states that as you develop your property, you can't do anything that's going to negatively affect your neighbors. Is that correct?
I don't know that is a federal law.
Is it state law?
There's a
Is that-
state law that basically says that you cannot block someone's upstream drainage, that you cannot, if somebody's draining through your property, you can't, block them up. I don't know that the state law gets as specific as this ordinance does, in the sense that this ordinance is saying that, at your property line for a particular 10-year storm event, the water gets 3 feet deep in this ditch. What this ordinance says is that no matter what they do downstream, whether they add flow, reduce flow, change the conveyance of the channel system downstream, that it's still got to be 3 feet when they finish. So this ordinance is very specific, but I don't think that the state laws go into enough detail. I'd have to research that. I guess the intent here was, if we put it in the local ordinance, we don't really have to worry what that one
Well, I
says.
tell you what, for one, I'd like to see the state law research. I'd like to see it put in the ordinance if it will help protect some of these people. I think it ought to
Okay.
just be plain.
Well, I can talk to O'Neill about that,
Yeah.
whether or not that really necessarily adds some
Right.
degree of protection, but we can certainly check that out.
Okay.
Mr.
Next
Chairman,
item.
Mr. Helen, we deal with this on a daily basis, and
Right.
and basically the state law has to do with ditches and drainage, natural drains and or man-made drains that becomes natural over time. And just like Mr. Sonia said, it really has to do with blocking these natural drains or these drainage ditches. It really don't go into a lot of the things that's in this ordinance. They don't get that specific. And again, we deal with it and we researched it pretty good bit, and it's just not that general.
Right.
But I'll talk to O'Neill.
Okay, I appreciate that. The excuse me. The next item is on paragraph 12 under design criteria. Item A specifically, it says, unless otherwise noted, all drainage design shall utilize a 10-year design frequency for a 24-hour storm duration, as determined by Technical Paper 40 published by the National Weather Service. I'm concerned that perhaps in some of these basins in the parish, developing to a 10-year design frequency is not enough. I feel like due to some of the existing drainage problems and flooding problems that we're having, that perhaps we should be doing it to a 25-year flood event and not a 10-year flood event. And would you like to comment on that, Mike?
That is simply a matter of preference, and I think we talked about this the other night. I believe that the 10-year storm is the norm. I believe it is what you will see in 90% of the drainage ordinances that you will read. Understand this. Houses and structures are protected against a 100-year event, okay? We design our drainage systems in these subdivisions for a 10-year event. That's what the pond is designed for. That's what the major road crossings. Actually, the interior pipe systems are only designed to a 5-year frequency, and that disturbs a lot of people in itself. But again, that is the norm of what you see. But a structure, the finished floor of a structure is protected to the 100-year in the sense that if FEMA determines that if the 100-year flood elevation is elevation 13, we're saying they have to build to 14. So the structure is protected to a 100-year event. So the question becomes, should the road be protected to higher than a 10-year event? I mean, at some point, in some point in a storm frequency that starts to exceed a 10-year, the road needs to flood, and the water needs to cross it and relieve itself. So you start stacking the criteria too high on the road, and you've got it up as high as the structure, and the road becomes the dam that causes the home to flood. So I don't want, and a lot of people have commented on this, and I don't want it to be mistaken.
Right.
We are still protecting the structures to the 100-year. If property happens not to be near a 100-year flood event where FEMA hasn't established it, then we look at a 100-year storm event for the detention pond, and we use that to establish a minimum floor. But 95% of the subdivisions in this parish have the flood zone, near it, in it, or some part of it, and we generally go by FEMA. And now, as you know, we have new flood maps coming out at the end of this year that are even more updated and more reliable that we can count on.
Right.
So now, and let me go to another section to make sure that
Well, while you're looking for that, I guess my
Okay.
comment when you say 90%, of the ordinances across the country, I don't know if I feel comfortable comparing us to those 90% because
And-
of our unique situation here in
and
South
you
Louisiana.
are flatter here.
Exactly.
your
We're
ditches-
lower, and
yes.
let's face it, Ascension Parish is being built where years ago it was swampland
Right.
and water everywhere.
And you make a good point, and I do think there are several points to this ordinance that go way above and beyond what you see in other ordinances.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to
Right.
have us have something so stringent that it's an impediment to development and it's too costly to develop. I'm just hoping that we pass the right ordinance and we have the maximum protection for our residents that we're doing.
Well,
everything
just
that we
remember,
do.
when this says 10-year, this is generally governing the road design.
Right.
And more importantly, you've got curb and gutter roads. You're governing the lowest point of a road in a subdivision. And with curb and gutter, your roads have longitudinal slope. Therefore, you're really talking about one or two critical points in the subdivision that you're designing to a 10-year. And when you raise those, if you go to a 25-year and you're making that road be built 6 inches higher, you're affecting the entire road system. You're making the whole road system rise. Okay.
Okay.
Then you have the situation where you need 2 feet of differential from that house pad down to the road so that it'll drain into it.
Right.
And again, if you make it higher, you're looking at more and more fill that's going to have to come in. It's almost where you're making the road govern the fill and not the FEMA 100-year elevation govern the fill. So it's an excellent point, and I think we could all argue that we need it or not. I think if we went to a 25-year, quite frankly, I would want to go back to the Planning Commission and probably into some, because I think the development and engineering community would be, in fairness to them, they went through the process seeing what we had and.
Right, and to that again, I say this again, I'm not talking about 25-year parish-wide. I'm talking about maybe in
certain areas,
basins where we have a history.
Well,
of
let me
drainage problems.
Let me point this out. Section 5B4, and Section 5B is the one that's kind of where I left off before we started questions about if there's a drainage canal through a piece of property. They have to prove before and after. They have to compute a water surface profile, existing condition, and then compute a water surface profile in the developed condition and prove it hasn't gotten greater. In that instance, and basically due to the Keystone project and the Keystone concern, we added in Section 4 and basically stated that for major streams, the Engineering Review Agency may require this analysis to be based upon a higher storm frequency than the 10-year event, particularly when the difference between the 10-year and 100-year is greater than 18 inches. And we did in the Keystone issue, and we basically asked the design consultant if he would do this, and he agreed to do it. But he studied it with the 83 flood of record, taking that as a backwater and adding a 100-year, I believe, a 10-year storm, and then taking a 10-year backwater and adding a 100-year storm. We tried to replicate that 83 storm event, and it affected their, bridge design quite a bit, and they agreed to do it. And that was all voluntary. But, what we're doing here is saying that in and around our streams that are very sensitive and where we have problems, that we do have the ability to ask for a higher storm event.
Okay.
And it's better to have to be looking at that issue on a higher storm event than just the individual detention ponds and road grades of every within the subdivision.
Right. Okay. And the last item I have is excuse me, is a comment that Mr. Rue had made at a previous Drainage Board meeting, saying that we could request on some of these developments that instead of having a zero impact on the existing drainage, that the development would have a negative impact. In other words, I guess, can we put that in the ordinance that in some of these flood-prone areas or these basins where we have recurring incidents and a history of inundation and a history of flooding, could we specify that maybe in certain basins in the parish where there is a known existing problem?
You can. In fact, you sent me 2 ordinances, if I'm not mistaken. That was you, and I did read those. St. Tammany specifies
City of Mandeville, I believe it was,
that parcels of 0 to 2 acres will reduce the peak runoff by 10%, 2 to 5 acres by 15%, 5 acres and larger 25%. So what that ordinance is saying is that if your existing site is generating 100 cubic feet per second of flow off of it under its existing condition, that after it's developed, it can only go 75. And that is a substantial reduction and a substantial detention requirement.
Right.
Now, this issue came up in the process, during the process, and we had an attorney, as you know, on our team and talked about this, and it was his opinion that it's questionable as to whether someone could challenge this in court. It's hard to say that my property now is doing this, and because I'm going to develop it, I have to reduce it and make it less. I mean, you're asking somebody to do more than its current condition. You know, I guess you'd have to have a lot of legal research done. But my concern there is that we put it in, it gets challenged, and then, you know, we're right back to it. St. Tammany is, to my knowledge, is the only one in the state that has put this in there. And actually, so what that's going to do, if you choose to go there, is it's going to make detention ponds bigger and bigger. I mean, the amount of storage that you need to do that is quite substantial. Now, I haven't gotten to that section yet, but in the arena of stormwater detention, there's a lot of different opinions about it. A lot of people question us, saying, you know, what are we going to do with all these ponds? Why are we building all these ponds? We don't think they're necessary. I believe in a lot of cases they are necessary. There are certain situations where I do not think they are. And basically what we have stated here is that if a development is far down in the watershed and they are right on the bank of the water of the stream, that it is okay for them to discharge their developed condition directly in without detention. And the theory is that you want to let that water go quick, and you want to hold up the water at the top of the watershed. You're basically fooling with the timing to keep it all from peaking at the same time. So I want to tell you that's in here. For that to be in here and then turn around and say we're going to, where it's being retained, we're going to reduce it to 75%. To reduce it to 75%, you're forcing everyone to go into the retention, and you're going to force these ponds to be much bigger. I personally believe that the biggest damage done in this parish is the fill of these overbank, what I call overbank flow, or fill along any of these natural channels. Doesn't matter if they're in the floodplain or not, but we see this all the time. And when we ask these engineers to analyze it, they say, well, that can't matter. And they go back and run their numbers, and they realize that the flow in that channel is 400 feet wide. And so when they want to fill right up next to the channel, it does have an impact. And I mean, they basically have to come in and widen the channel through their property to offset. But that is probably what I think has been more detrimental to any flooding issues here, more so than just the development itself, or the increased rate of runoff from development. So my theory is, if we can, this is truly a zero impact ordinance, and it's that way for three reasons. We're saying that you can't increase the flow off your property. We're saying that you can't decrease the flood storage volume by just hauling fill in. And we're saying that if you have a channel through your property or a conveyance, that you cannot increase the water surface profile. If those three items are met, if those three items were met 50 years ago coming forward, we'd be fine. But, you know, life is what it is.
Yeah,
so your point's well taken, and it has been done. I don't want to say it hasn't been done. I just think the risk of putting it in there and having it challenged, I think there's bigger fish to fry here than that one. But, you know, it's kind of like the 25-year storm event. I mean, if that's what y'all feel is going to give you greater comfort, then we can certainly go back and take a look at it.
Well, I guess we could, you know, see if DPW's got some input, or I know there's been a lot of work going into this ordinance. I know it's a definite improvement over what we've had in the past, and it is getting late to start putting changes in. But like Kent, as the chairman has said many times, this is going to be a living document, and you know, based on historical data and then what happens in the future, the problems that are presented and what DPW has to deal with, we may have to come back and make those changes to the living document and tighten up some areas that will help the citizens, the residents, and benefit for the overall benefit of the parish.
That's fine if they. I mean, C.J. Godan has been involved with us, from the beginning on this. But I mean, if y'all want to take another look at it, that's fine.
I'd like to see us get this done. It's truly the first time we've had zero impact, because we've allowed individuals, and if you go about the parish and you notice that there's no law right now against an individual hauling in all the field he wants right up against a bank of a major stream, and it doesn't take you long to ride around and see hundreds of them.
Right.
And it's making the water stack up, and if we can just eliminate that, I think we're not going to get an increase in what we have, and I think we ought to go from this point of zero impact and see what the effect that has. And I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. You do have an option to request people in sensitive areas to go above and beyond that where it deems necessary, and I think DPW can request too.
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. And we're okay going with it like it is. The fact of the matter is, when we get into a development, that's a point of issue that we can raise with the individual development, and it might be a chance for him to go. I mean, he's able to go to as far as a variance to maybe even offset that difference in storage space to maybe smaller lots or something like that. I mean, we could trade off some certain things and recommend a trade-off to get that negative reduction if we have to.
Okay.
And we can work it from that end. The other thing that we just starting to look at right now, and it gets kind of confusing. We're seeing now, we're taking some real-time measurements, and we haven't really talked to Michael too much about it, but we're seeing some real-time elevation marks from the rainfalls, and that we judge a 10-year event, and it's in some areas it's actually higher than what the FEMA says a 10-year event should be at that location. Now, we're going back to FEMA and look at it and discuss some things with them, but if that's true, I think the FEMA maps and a lot of this is theoretical, and some of the real-time marks are actually, and I think that's why we may be having a little problem. Is that, well, I'll put it on 100-year, my elevation 100-year mark, but that, as per FEMA, that may not be the real 100-year mark as what happens at that location when you get that much rainfall in that much duration. I mean, it varies throughout the parish. So you may be flooding and say, well, I did everything I could, but that might not be the true elevation it should be at.
We actually have that covered under the requirement of structures. You have to build 1 foot above FEMA, but item 2 says record inundation.
That's right.
So if you have a recorded elevation that the water's gotten to, and somebody applies for a permit and they say, oh, well, no, FEMA says it's 10. With this ordinance, you can say, no, it's 11, so you've got to build at 12. So what's lacking, I don't want to say lacking, the data's not easy to get to. What we really need is, true or good inundation records spotted throughout the parish, where when you get this data, you get it on a map where we have access to it when we're reviewing these plans. But this ordinance does allow the provision that if you have a known record inundation, we can add that as a criteria and make them build above it.
And that's my point. We looked at that, and that's what we're happy about. And in fact, we are collecting real-time records of every rain event we've had since Katrina. And we have our people, in fact, a survey crew primarily during an event and immediately after the event, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after, is out at every possible location of high water, especially where there's flooding, and taking real-time measurements. And we have gauges out there collecting rainfall so we can match the two. And we are placing that on a map as we speak through our GIS department. And so we are doing that. But that fits in good with the ordinance.
Very good. Okay, just a couple other sections just to make sure. Placement of fill below the base flood elevation, and this is, as I said, we're really enforcing all of these issues with the subdivision developers right now. The change of this ordinance is it's going to reach out and affect everyone, and so You're going to have a person with a piece of property who's owned it for 50 years, doesn't know that it's 2 feet below the flood elevation, ready to build a house, come apply for a permit, and they're going to say, well, where are you going to get your fill? Under this ordinance, you cannot haul fill into the flood zone and decrease the flood storage capacity. They're going to have to generate the dirt from within their own property. Basically, if the land's at 8 and they need to build a 10, they're going to have to go down and take part of their land and dig it down to 6 to get the dirt and compensate for it. So, but there's as much damage being
built on piers.
Or they could build it on piers. So there's as much damage being done out there by, what's not necessarily construed as the developers, but just the landowners. If there's fill being placed, it's not being regulated right now. So I think, that one is going to be going to cause some controversy, and I think y'all need to be very aware of that before we pass it. Stormwater detention requirements will apply to all residential and all commercial. Right now, we have no way of mandating a commercial development, a Walmart even, that they have to detain their water. There's no provision. The exceptions are that residential developments having lot sizes equal or greater than 1 acre, which is pretty rare, but if someone's going to do 1 acre lots, I don't think it's fair to ask them to detain. And then the point I mentioned a while ago is that if you're at basically the downstream end of a large system and you're right on the channel, that you can freely discharge. If you have to go through other people's property where there's not adequate system, then you would still have to detain or prove that you can get to the main channel. So, we think that this is a proper and fair way of addressing the detention issue. Another big issue, this ordinance will eliminate open ditches along roadways in new developments. In other words, there will be no more open ditch streets, and this is something the Department of Public Works has really harped on. And there's not that many developments requesting to do this today, but there are a few. But this would not allow that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Michael, have y'all given any thought to the ditches that the subdivisions are digging in the back also?
Yes.
Because I've heard DPW complain many times. People build their fences and
right.
have no access. And
we've talked about that. I don't think the issue of the fences being built belongs in the drainage ordinance. We're saying that we do need rear yard swales to drain it. One of the things that I guess the consensus we've come to so far is to consider taking those rear swales and making them a common area or even a right-of-way that's dedicated to the parish where the lot owner would not own the swale. And that way, when it's platted and those corners are staked, those corners would be staked outside of that swale or short of the swale. And when they go to fence, that would be the only place they would be entitled to fence. Now, is somebody going to extend their fence further and try to grab that property? I don't know, but right now the way it is people have their lot surveyed and they tell somebody to build a fence to their corners, and they're not intentionally trying to block the drainage. They just, that's just the logical thing to do. Now, if we did this, it would really be more of a zoning ordinance and subdivision policy change, because now you're taking away square footage from the lot, and the developers have to comply with the minimum square footage under the zoning ordinance. So you do have to look at the impacts of that, but unless y'all have come up with some other idea, that's the latest thing we've talked about. But I really don't think that issue belongs to the drainage ordinance.
I think also one of the things, if you make the rear ditch, if you build it in such that the people can cut it easily, it can be a lot easily maintained by the people. And a lot of times we dig these ditches and they got straight slopes and people can't cut them with their lawnmowers.
I think we've made a lot of headway in that in the last year or so, but that's not the majority of what you're seeing out there, unfortunately. Right. But we've been very strict that the maximum slope is a 5-to-1 and which is very mobile, and it's forced a lot of these new subdivisions. They're having to run pipe back and catch basins to accept the water to keep the slopes down. But there are some in the past, I agree, that they're just not maintainable. And the people have they want to cover them in, and if they're only 18 inches deep, they're not going to want to cover them. There's not enough room. And so I think we've got a good thing going. Unfortunately, y'all are hearing about issues and that date further back than what's actually happening right now.
So in your opinion, we would have that pretty much covered with what we're doing now?
Mr. Chairman, I can comment. The new subdivisions coming up now, when they go through, Mr. Sanjay, in planning, that with the true swells that's putting in now, we don't have much of a problem with. Except for one thing, when they put the fence, sometimes some of the people want to put the fence all the way to the bottom of the swell even, and we have to go back and talk to them a few things about that. But as far as maintaining those ditches, we really, on the new ones, we haven't seen a lot of problems with it.
I'll tell you, the fencing causes other problems. You could have a subdivision that built 3 years ago, and they have a rear yard swale. And then we have a new subdivision backing up to them. And because trees are grown in and fences are there, we can't get to it. And so we have to make the new subdivision right next to it dedicate 15. So you've got a swale ditch and then a property line and another swale ditch. And it really looks silly. But if we had a little more control of ownership over those swales, we could prevent that from happening. But that situation's happened a lot, and people look at us like we're crazy. But what are you going to do? We can't go in and tear up somebody's trees and yard to help the other subdivision drain, and so you end up with 30 feet of servitude back there.
But back on saying that we don't have a problem, if DPW is asked to make a recommendation, our recommendation is to take it as fee title. In other words, take that swell as ownership and place the property marks outside of that swell. I mean, that would be our recommendation if it was possible.
Okay.
So that's basically, I've kind of run through the high points there. If you have any other questions, or I don't know where you want to take this from here, but we're ready for it to move forward.
You're ready for it as is to be moved
I mean,
forward.
I have obtained some minor comments through the process, several of them, and I intend to incorporate all that. But I mean, that's something I can do in a week's time.
Okay.
Just waiting to gather all the input.
Could you put your suggestions together in there and send us a document that we can vote on next?
Okay.
I think next
Next month.
planning meeting we can vote on this and have this move on. See if we have any adjustments or anything.
Michael, the local builders and all, are they on board now with the changes they've submitted? I mean, for the most part, are they?
The builders really did not have much comment on this. They obviously were interested in the traffic impact because it potentially.
Developers and all, I should say.
No, the developers, yes.
Yeah.
We had not only developers, but we had the engineers that do a lot of the development work, sat in meetings with us and have reviewed it, commented, and that all really occurred before it came to you. So, and they're okay with it because this is what we're enforcing. We're enforcing all these things now with the subdivision developers. I just really don't have an ordinance that tells me I can. But so they're, they want to see some definition and have this thing locked in an ordinance where they know what the game is.
Mr. Barringer.
Yeah, I was going to say that the real opposition here would be the dirt haulers. And I'm not sure if y'all got with any dirt people or.
I mean, this has all been advertised every step of the way, but no, I don't know that I have necessarily.
Well, and I think what you're going to see now is you're going to see a shift. Is a lot of the dirt haulers are going to do some dirt work within the property, and these are areas that are the flooding areas.
Sure.
And that's all we're talking about. Now, that's a substantial area.
That's correct.
Of the
If you're
parish.
not in a flood zone and you
But
want to fill to level your property, you can do that.
It's also make sure everybody knows, once you raise your property to the flood line, then you can build up whatever you want.
You can build
after
up
that.
higher
If
if you
they
want.
want to build up 10
You can
feet
haul
after
it
that, it
in.
doesn't matter.
What? Can I ask a
So,
question?
yes, sir.
What do you classify a flood zone? Any classification?
As determined by FEMA.
That's
No,
the whole parish, then, I believe.
No, it's not. I mean, not.
It's pretty close.
You got a lot that's outside, but particularly in the northwestern part. But if you're below the 100-year flood elevation, then that's where it would kick in.
But I mean, the fact of the matter is, that's what's happening right now. I mean, that's where we're building, and we cannot continue to do things the way we are. I mean, just look around. We're having flooding, and we're having problems, and you know, it's painful to address. But at some point in time, we have to address this. I mean, I think we have a responsibility to make sure nobody else in this parish floods. That's first and foremost.
FEMA, after the '89 flood in East Baton Rouge Parish, FEMA basically came in and says, you either do this or you're not going to have flood insurance. And it has been beyond question the most advantageous thing done regarding, you know, the flooding problems, is that it's just like taking a bathtub and filling it with water and pushing in a balloon inside of it. It's going to make the water go up. And when you haul fill into that bathtub, you're doing the same thing. You're reducing the storage, and the water's going to go up. It's very small, it's very incremental, but when you add it up with all those properties in 10 years of time, it will make a big difference.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the other thing, too, is that we need this thing passed quickly.
Yeah.
The problem is we've been going out, we're trying to build up our floodplain management group and really being proactive out there. The fact of the matter is we're going out there, people calling us all over the place. We've seen things happen, and we go out there, and we have no powers to do anything. We need this ordinance so we can prevent the fill next to these bayous and storage areas. And right now, we're just beating our head against the wall. I mean, we go and talk to the people, but we have no police powers. So
Well,
we need to move on it.
I'm suggesting, and Mr. Zahn put it on the next strategic planning meeting to vote on. And if anybody has any suggestions or changes, to bring it forward. And we're going to act on it one way or another next meeting, and then recommend it to the council.
And
The question I have is there any reason why not to go ahead maybe and vote on this tonight, just as is?
Well, there are some changes to be made,
He had a
and
couple.
I mean, I would rather bring it back and have the changes highlighted, make sure everyone understands what they are. And, I mean, that's up to you. You could make the change, and you could approve it, and I could have the changes before the council. Give everybody that
I would rather have
opportunity
a copy with the changes highlighted. Let us vote on it. I think we've talked about it. We discussed it and cussed it and everything
Okay.
else. And let's take
Whichever
it and
way
move
y'all
forward.
want to go with it.
We're going to have to bite the bullet sooner or later.
Mr. Chairman, I'd suggest maybe to speed it up, process up, is have a special meeting, maybe in a week or 10 days, and let's try to get it on the, if not the first council meeting, get it introduced the second.
I will. What I'll do is I'll get with Mr. Sanji, and when he finishes his clear copy, if we have an appropriate date that we can have a meeting for this, and then I will try to do that.
Okay, good, thank you.
We will try to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanji. And number 12, outdoor burning ordinance. We had been discussing this. Something else that has been on the agenda you have before you, an outdoor burning ordinance. We've had some complaints in basically the subdivisions of the parish. The problem we have in the parish right now is that we have a group of people that are building next door to each other and in subdivisions and very close, and problems with burning. And then you have your rural areas where people are burning their trash on a normal, everyday event, and people are very fine with that. And how do you manage those two entities in a parish so diverse as what we have? So that, in a sense, is why we haven't passed anything yet on outdoor burning, but I'm open to your suggestions right now.
Yeah, Mr.
Mr.
Shakespeare.
Barriger.
First question I have: we pass this ordinance, or we use the state ordinance? Who's gonna govern this? Who's gonna police it? Because we have a state ordinance that's virtually the same. Talks about the 1,000 feet, everything else. I have one particular homeowner calls me at least twice a week. I don't know what to tell him. Call the sheriff's department. They got to where they hang up on him now. Who's going to police it? If we pass this one or another one. Before we pass anything, we need to make sure we have a way and a means to police an ordinance.
I have no answer, but Mr. Hillenbeck.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know in my district, you've got situations where they're burning in a subdivision adjacent to another subdivision, and the problem there is, of course, you have, excuse me, you have elderly people with breathing problems, and you have children with health conditions that are asthmatic or allergies and what have you, and when they're burning, and they're burning trash and plastic and everything else, it just it's not a good situation. Will an ordinance, locally passed ordinance, help? I'm not sure, Mr. Byer. You make a good point, but I would think that any ordinance that we pass that is lawful and legal, that the sheriff's office would honor. And so, I mean, that's not our call. I mean, it's an enforcement issue after the ordinance is passed. And whether this is exact with the state law, I'm not sure. But I did ask Mr. Babbitt to put this together, and he said this was a start point. And of course, Dr. Babbitt's not here tonight, but I think we need to take a look at it.
I think it's a very good starting point. One of the things I'd like to add to it is that we would limit it to the areas of medium intensity zoning, because if you're in a rural or a conservation area, I think that's the point of that, is to have that different designation, and we could start there, and I think we would get acceptance in the parish. That way the people that are living close together would be protected, and the people that were in more rural areas would have the freedom to do what they bought their property for. And then the other thing is that I would like to ask legal to institute in their penalties in a process. Who's going to enforce it? What's going to be the penalties? And all of that, exactly how it's going to be. I agree 100%, Ms. Barriger. If we don't have any enforcement policy and what is the fine, how do we go about doing it, and who's going to enforce it? This is just another piece of paper that piles up.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And again, we're going through this right now because we have what we commonly call the logging ordinance. It's basically just coming on to a parish road from an undeveloped piece of land, and we're having a lot of problems with it right now. And to be honest, the only way you can ultimately enforce any ordinance is through the sheriff's office. I mean, it comes back down to them, because what we're having to do is go out there and we tell the people, you can't enter this road, you don't have a permit. And we ultimately have to call the sheriff's office, get them out there, show the sheriff's office the ordinance, and then they enforce it. And I think it's very similar to a burning type situation too. You have to. The sheriff's office is really the only one that can enforce it.
Well, I would like to see legal get the sheriff's office to sign off on this as a process that we would have, that it would be how we'd go about it, if it's filed as a complaint by a neighbor or by the parish, and that it goes to the sheriff's office, and they are in the process of enforcement, and that they sign off on it, that this is how they would like to see it enforced, because they may have some suggestions also, because if we can't get it enforced, it's not going to do us any good. Yes, Mr. Barry.
And I've actually talked to a fireman last week that got called out during the middle of the day for just a simple trash fire. Sheriff's Department also showed up, and they took no action. It was, to them, no concern. They had a lot bigger fish to fry, and it wasn't a danger to anything, so they just left. So that's the type of things I'm talking about. And like you say, we definitely need to get together and talk with them.
But if we had it in this ordinance
that
they had upon sheriff's investigation that they would be fined X amount on the first offense and so on and so forth,
right,
then they wouldn't have that discretion. They would have to follow it up, and that would be something that we could get with the sheriff's department. Mr. Hillenbeck, can you get with legal and ask him to?
Yeah, I'll get back with Mr. Babb and ask him to have some dialogue maybe with the sheriff's office. Like I say, the particular incident or instance that's going on, it's some people do not close their windows. Certain times of the year they leave their windows open, and it is a matter of health, public health concern that these odors are getting in the houses and what have you, and people with breathing problems and everything else. So something's going to have to be done.
Everybody agrees with all of that, and something needs to be done.
I like your idea about that medium intensity zone and being applied there. I mean, that's a good idea, and that needs to be written into there.
Anything that and above.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, one question. Does the amount of burning have something to do with it? And let's talk about sugarcane. Now, they're way out in the field, but the quantity of burning and smoke they put out, it affects half the parish sometimes.
Well, that's, according to this, on agricultural burns are not affected, and that's one of the things.
I mean, we get more complaints about that than common fires.
And
at certain times of the year.
Yeah, and one of my if you move by a sugarcane farm, you're going to get ashes in the fall, and if you move next to Armette, you're going to get some orange fallout from the ponds, and these farms have been there, and it's agricultural property that are exempt from a lot of these regulations because they're agricultural property, and that's one of the reasons why we have agriculture. And I think a lot of that has been addressed, and I don't want to trivialize that, but a lot of the burning has been addressed lately in the past couple of years, and the farmers, because I've been somewhat involved in it, the farmers have gone to some seminars about how to, when to, and some restrictions on burning, and I think the last couple of years it's been a lot better. At my house on occasion we get the little black flakes, but I think you're seeing a responsibility picked up by the farmers now that you didn't have in the past couple of years. So I'd like to see how that goes before we do anything on agriculture.
Mr. Chairman, just one other comment. One of the big things that I see is more like subdivision burn. Before they clear the lots and you got the big pile of trees and then take the big diesel blowers out there and light up and want to burn all that. I mean, I live in Prairieville area, Dutchtown area, which it happens once a week almost now. That affects us more than the trash burning in the rural area.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you did say that. Those instances would be exempt because that is due to construction and in permitted areas for a certain period of time, but at least that would be limited to the construction process, and it wouldn't be something that would be prolonged for a long period of time. Right now, it's not regulated at all,
Right.
And so we would have some control over it.
Right. I'd like to add that the city's ordinance, you can burn in the city if you're clearing like that,
Yes.
but when you get that first complaint, you're shut down from that point from burning. So you have to do something else with it at that point.
Yeah, so they do have something there. Okay. Report by Planning and Zoning. I think Mr. Kraus is the only one here. Did you?
Probably the only thing in addition to our regular subdivisions that we looked at this past month, we're introducing a review of the family petitions. And at our next meeting, we will have a public hearing to address that and take public comments on the family petitions.
Okay. Anybody interested in the family petitions? Please make sure that you participate in the public hearing. I know that's up for review, and I think the reason y'all are doing this family petition is a very good idea. The intent is to keep family property within the family, enable them to pass it on down.
Right.
And what we're seeing in the parish is that people are using a family petition loophole as a way to develop subdivision without any regulations.
In some cases.
And
In some cases.
and in some cases.
Right.
And I think the Planning Commission is trying to close those loopholes for those people that are
I
doing
think
that.
the drainage will do, a lot of it in that regards, but the other issues we want to.
So we
Catch
welcome people's input into that and suggestions on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Krause. Report by the Zoning Board of Adjustments.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'd like to
Mr.
apologize.
Cecil?
I'd like to apologize for no report last month. I was called out of town, and unfortunately, I didn't transfer that information needed to Mr. Brad Walker. So I apologize that, and I apologize to Mr. Walker's. And also, as of to date, we have not yet got a meeting date for the planning and zoning, which we requested during our last report. Don't know what the problem is there, but we're kind of stonewalled there a little bit.
Mr. Lance, can you set up a meeting with planning and zoning and members of the strategic planning so that we could have just a working meeting with some representatives from each group, 2 representatives from each group? We had asked that of
A month ago.
before, so could you please make sure that happens? Thank you.
And just letting you know, with the condition of the board, we're still 1 member down, but that advertisement's been out for over 4 months now, and we hadn't had any applicants yet. So, but it has not affected our board in any way. We were able to have a quorum at every meeting. The only other thing that's a big issue to us right now, because we've been recently approached with it, was with the variances on the FEMA trailers. We've went through your recommendations. We do have problems with recommendations 4 through 7. This pertains to the legal aspect as far as the parish is concerned, simply because if these trailers were removed by the parish, then they would have to be stored, and any damage to these trailers would be responsibility of the Ascension Parish. I think this needs to be looked at. I think by this particular board, I think that we need to go over the real responsibility of what FEMA is doing. I have contacted FEMA, and basically the 18-month period that we would allow, maximum period that we would allow on the variance, is not reasonable. The reason why I say that is FEMA wouldn't act on if basically those trailers could stay there as long as they want, and because they would give them extension after extension if it was needed. And
So what
did
you're saying,
research with another state, and they've informed us the same way that FEMA wouldn't be able to police anything that was suggested in through 4 through 7. And also, I don't think we're adequate to police that neither legally. I think that needs to be, those recommendations that were sent, I think should need to be taken a look at a little bit more, especially when it involves us giving variances, because basically it'd be a moot point even if we gave them a variance. So that's something that we need
Mr.
to
Lance,
take a
can you
look
put
at.
that down as one of the items?
That's something that we have concern about. Other than that, we're doing great.
Okay. Yes, and I had the opportunity to attend a couple of variance board meetings, and I was very impressed with the inquisitiveness of you guys and just how detailed you went into things. And I think it's good to have the time that you spent and everything doing that. I was real pleased with the effort y'all put forth. So thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
New business.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I was asked
Mr. Root.
I was asked to report tonight to let you know of the new organization at Planning and Development and DPW.
Would you please, sir?
The new organization now, and the chart is not out completely yet, but all of planning and development and building and permits is under DPW. Mr. Lance Brock is Assistant Director with responsibility and Chief Zoning Official. His section is the Planning and Development section, which he has been pretty much handling for the last few years anyway. But officially, he's Assistant Director, and he's over that section, which includes the planner and himself and their assistants. Mr. Laverne Bourgeois is the Chief Building Inspector and also Assistant Director over permits and the building inspectors. The subdivision inspectors has been moved under our engineering department. And we're going to add to that department several more inspectors for infrastructure of subdivisions, roads and drainage and other infrastructures pertaining to subdivisions. Again, they're under our engineering section, our 2 engineers. So basically, that's the new organization that we have. We're all working together at all meetings, at all development pre-app meetings, pre-construction meetings. All our engineers are involved with the planning department, with Mr. Becknell and Mr. Brock, on looking at all the problems that may occur during the development and try to take care of those problems before they occur. And we will be represented at the zoning commission meetings, and also probably most of the variance meetings also. So again, that's the new organization of DPW, and it can be changed, but we're going to see what it looks like right now, because we all are so much interconnected. They depend on us, we depend on them to police and see what's going on out there. They look for our recommendations on developments, so I think it's going to work, but we're going to give it a try, and that's the new organization.
Mr. Rue, I think in the past, we have not had a true parish-wide planner, and it's been one of the things that we don't really know what our overall plan is as we go in with these developments and everything. Is that something that you're looking at?
That is one of the tasks that Mr. Brock, as the assistant director over that section, is preparing a long-term plan of what that section should be, including adding, certain planners, advanced planning, current planning officials, and again, he's preparing that plan as we speak.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is that since we're now involved in subdivisions and developments and things, could you possibly, on a monthly basis to strategic planning, report on, let's just say, big developments, and then what is the parish doing to ensure that these big developments are going to be adequate, that we're going to have drainage, we're going to have the roads taken care of and such, so that people would know. A lot of times we have developments and maybe DPW is doing something to alleviate some of the potential problems and nobody knows about it, and I think that would alleviate their fears if we just have a report every month that these following developments are being done, and this is some of the things that we're doing to ensure that they're done properly, or that we can see that the drainage and infrastructure is there for us, or that it might be inadequate and we need to do something to help you.
Yeah, we can do that, and I'll let you know something that we have started this week, in fact, and which we have never done before. We started meeting with school officials and looking at some of the sites that they're not only they already have in hand and preparing to build schools on, but also some land areas what they're thinking about buying. And in fact, through a conversation that we had with some officials yesterday, I think it's pretty evident they're going to back off of one piece because of some concerns we have with floodplain management. So they're preparing traffic impact studies to go along with the new schools that's planned, which they've never done before. So we can work with them on alleviating some of the traffic problems before the school is even constructed. So we are doing some pretty good things, but we'd be glad to report back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Rue. I'm glad you took that bull by the horns. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Old business.
Motion adjourned.
This meeting is adjourned.